So there I was catching them. I made all this ground up, and then I was stuck. I've been stuck for a few laps. I was strong on the brakes, and I was trying to make up time mid-corner, make up a couple bike lengths. And every time we come off the corner, he'd yard me 5 or 6 bikes. And I had to try and get it all back on the brakes the next time. And I could get there, but I couldn't get by. The yo-yo game, back and forth, it was frustrating. Then I had a realization, kind of a breakthrough mid-race that changed the entire outcome. This video is where we get to tell you all about it. Welcome to Gas on Bike Up in part 2 of our 3-part series on line selection. I'm particularly excited about this one because this section drives makes more impact on your riding and more impact on your lap times than any other type of corner. If you haven't seen part 1 of this series for roll speed, please check it out here. That video sets the context and lays down the fundamental concepts that we use throughout this video. Drive focused corners, especially those that lead onto long straightaways, they're the number one way to drop your lap times. Why? It's simple. Duration of advantage. You get on a long straightaway, you might spend the last 20% on braking. You spend a few seconds rolling through the middle of the next corner. And then as you drive off to a long straightaway, that advantage, that 2 or 3 miles an hour you might carry off that corner, well, that can last 5, 10, 15 seconds. At a recent school, we had top Moto America Tyler Scott as a guest coach. On the spot, I asked Tyler, hey, when you're coming to a racetrack, what's the first corner you focus on? Without hesitation, Tyler said, I focus on the corner that leads to the longest straightaway. Tyler's been trained by world-class people from the time he was young. He's raced over in Europe. He's now a top Moto America Supersport rider. And every time he comes to a racetrack, the first corner he makes sure he gets right is that drive onto the longest straightaway. As a review, there are 3 fundamentals that apply to every corner. We cover those in that video here. The first one is to use your eyes, to make sure you can see your direction early so that you have the bike pointed in the right direction at the right time. The second is to use your body, to make sure that your body, especially as you go back to the throttle, is in a position where your motorcycle can move independently of you, using your core and your legs to lock into the motorcycle, to unweight the seat, to be light with your hands and your body, so in effect the bike can move underneath you. This is most critical when you're at highest lean angle, when you have the highest risk and you need to have the ability to have the bike have the most traction possible for simply carrying corner speed. To allow the bike to have the maximum grip where it needs it most, you need to release all unnecessary loads at that time. That is done with your body. The third is to be smooth with your inputs, both with your brakes and with your throttle. Since the focus of this video is drive corners, the throttle application will be our primary topic. The key here is to be smooth with your application so you don't upset the chassis and you don't get the motorcycle's throttle ahead of the rear tire. We'll talk about all those in extensive detail. When discussing strategy, our reference line is always the roll speed line. That doesn't mean this is the line you should always take, but this is our baseline that we use for comparison. The roll speed line is simple. You basically fit the largest radius you possibly can on the corner. The entire focus is to carry maximum roll speed. The roll speed line is the simplest line of all. It is simply the largest radius you can fit in that given corner. Anytime we change from that roll speed focus line, it involves sacrifice. In a drive focused corner, we're choosing at some point before the apex to tighten up that arc, to give up a little bit of roll speed, to perhaps trail brake a little bit longer, to allow us to change direction quicker, so we can come through the apex with less lean angle and rolling on the throttle more. The entire mission, the entire goal, is to get wide open sooner. And in effect, that will allow us to have the greatest terminal straightaway speed in the important straightaway that follows a drive focused corner. As a quick comparison for what you do with the controls for a roll speed versus a drive focused corner. First, your bar input. Your bar input in a roll speed focused corner, your major effort happens as you come off the outside edge of the racetrack and change lean angle. Your bar input happens as you are getting to full lean. In an ideal world, that happens quickly. From the edge of the racetrack, boom, you get to full lean early. So you can spend the long time in the corner at a constant radius, not putting a lot of bar input through the meat of that corner, so you have the maximum amount of grip to carry roll speed. Conversely, in a dry focus corner, that bar input will happen a little deeper in the corner, a little later. We're going to wait longer and get deeper into the corner and make a short, precise input. It's rare in a dry focus corner that you have bar input for any duration of time. Braking inputs are a little different as well. In a roll speed focus corner, we tend to trail brake longer. In a roll speed focus corner, you'll have some sort of braking straight up and down. As we enter the corner, much of that brake effort is released. We might go from a max brake pressure of 100 pounds and then immediately drop off to 20, 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, all the way to the apex of a roll speed focus corner. The duration of your trail braking tends to be a lot longer. Because we're carrying roll speed, we're not allocating a lot of front tire for braking force. So we'll have this brake here will be mostly operated with one finger. Our brakes are primarily used for fine-tuning of our direction at the apex. In a dry focus corner, we tend to be harder on the brakes on the way in for longer. Dry focus corners tend to have a lot less trail braking than a roll speed focus corner. You want to get in, get your direction done, and then get right back to the throttle. The acceleration in roll speed versus dry focus corners is, of course, the biggest difference. In a roll speed focus corner, we tend to pick the throttle up smoothly right at the apex. And we begin our drive as we come through the apex and really start to roll on as we finish and take away lean angle on the way out of the corner. A dry focus corner, on the other hand, we'll typically hit on the throttle before the apex. And as we come through the apex, we are taking away significant lean angle as we accelerate off that corner. The difference in a dry focus corner is that our goal is to have significantly less lean angle and significantly more throttle. We give up speed on the way in to gain a bunch of speed on the way out. The concept of the dry focus versus the roll speed focus line is pretty common. What's not talked about very often is, yes, we apex later, but how much later? How do we decide how much later we make our apex? How do we decide how much speed is enough speed to give up? How much longer do we trail brake? How many extra miles an hour do we sacrifice in order to get that better drive? Where's the balance? This comes back to the reasons why we give up speed to begin with. We only give up speed if we need extra grip. I'll say that again. We'll only give up speed if we need extra grip. If we need extra grip, we need to give up lean angle in order to get that grip. How much we give up depends on horsepower. Here's a quick review of threshold of traction speed. We've talked about this in other videos. The threshold of traction speed is simply this. It is the mile an hour that, absent irresponsible bar input, which means you have to be riding properly and be loose on the bars, but it is the speed that your motorcycle, once it has gone past that speed, will no longer spin the tire. We'll choose arbitrary numbers for the sake of discussion. We'll say if you're on a 400, once you're past 50 miles an hour at full lean and full throttle, it doesn't have enough horsepower to spin the tire anymore. On a 600, that speed might be 75 miles an hour. And on a 1000, that speed may be 100 miles an hour. So when you have corners that fall in the middle of those zones, in between 50 and 75, or in between 75 and 100, some bikes will take a roll speed line, and other bikes will take a dry focus line. It's because those bikes that need a dry focus line need to take away lean angle so they have the grip available so you can fully take advantage of your direction. One final definition of direction. You have direction when you can take away lean angle and add throttle in a constant fashion without giving it up. So let's talk about a representative corner. In this corner, we'll say it's about a 40 or 45 mile an hour slowest point in the corner. That means at the end of your braking, in the beginning of your acceleration, you're somewhere between 40 and 45 miles an hour. We'll say it leads to a 1,500 foot straightaway, a long straightaway that will have a significant impact on your lap times. The first thing we'll pay attention to is how far past the slowest point of the corner your bike will exceed your threshold of traction. Remember, all of our bikes are between 40 and 45 miles an hour at the apex. On a 400, it might only take 30 feet for that bike to accelerate from 40 or 45 past 50, to the point where you're safely past your threshold of traction speed. On a 600, it might take 80 feet to go from 40 to 45 miles an hour past 75 miles an hour, to the point where you are safely past that threshold of traction. On a 1000, you might have to go 200 feet before you go from 40 or 45 miles an hour past that 100 mile an hour mark, where your bike will no longer spin the tire. It is only at that point that you are allowed to add bar input and steer the motorcycle to help it finish the corner. In all of these cases, from the 400 through the 1000, we will be rolling on the throttle harder through the apex than we would in a roll speed focused corner. In fact, we'll say that in this particular corner, if it were a roll speed focused line, we could carry 45 miles an hour through the apex. On a 400, because it only takes about 30 feet for it to get past that 45 mile an hour mark, to get 50, 55 miles an hour where you're comfortable, where you're safely above that threshold of traction speed, we're only going to give up a little bit of extra speed. We might go 43 or 44 miles an hour through the apex instead of 45. And we might only move the apex 5 feet later. That bike won't have a very big change. However, on the 600, that 600 may need to slow down to 42 or 43 miles an hour. And as a result, they're going to move that apex 10 feet, almost 2 full bike lengths, past the original apex of the roll speed focused line. They're going to take away some lean angle. They've gone from the inside halfway across the track width on the exit before they get to that 80 mile an hour mark. Once past that 80 mile an hour mark, the 600 can now begin to finish the corner a little bit if it needs to. The 1000, on the other hand, will probably have to slow down the most, down to 41 or 42 miles an hour as the slowest point of the corner. Their apex will be the latest. It might be 3 bike lengths or 20 feet past the original apex. They're going to give up more speed mid-corner. But because that bike makes 200 horsepower, as opposed to say 120 for the 600 or 50 for the 400, it needs a significant reduction in lean angle. Major difference in all of these bikes and how you adjust the drive is the length of our GasOnBikeUp zone. That zone where we are not allowed to add bar input. From the moment you crack the throttle on until you get past that threshold of traction speed, you can do nothing but relax and let the bike stand up. All of your acceleration, every degree of your throttle opening is accompanied with a degree of lean angle reduction. Now the goal in a corner like this is to use all of the exit that you are comfortable. This is different for riders at different levels. Expert and professional riders will often use all but the last foot or two. Sometimes they'll go all the way to the very edge. If there's a white line, they'll be right on it. Amateur riders or newer track riders, it's okay if you don't use the last 3 or 4 feet of the racetrack, leaving that as a buffer zone. Your personal comfort level is important. However, whatever you predetermine your comfort level to be it 6 inches or 6 feet from the outside of the racetrack, you should be carried to that line through your throttle action and reduction of lean angle, not by steering your way to the outside of the racetrack. That's a very important distinction. Because the fundamental concept of GasOnBikeUp forces us to reduce lean angle with every bit that we add throttle, that will also widen your arc. The more you roll on, the more you stand up, the straighter your exit will be, the faster you will roll to the outside. As we do this in a linear fashion, under control, not letting your right wrist get ahead of the rear tire, where you and there's a constant connection between your right wrist and the rear tire, as opposed to whoop and letting it catch up all at once. That's something we never want to do. So in doing so, we are effectively steering with the throttle. Steering with the throttle does not have to be a MotoGP rider with the wheel cocked out sideways spinning the tire. Steering with the throttle means being committed to your line, rolling on at a rate where you're allowed to let go of the motorcycle and let your roll-on rate dictate your arc by letting the motorcycle stand up on its own. So back to my story. The corner that I was having the biggest problem with was a slightly longer corner. I was strong on the brakes, but it turns out I was rushing mid-corner. And what I wasn't getting as a result of me rushing mid-corner was I was not getting direction. Remember, direction allows me to add throttle and take away lean angle in a constant fashion without giving it up. What I was missing was the in constant fashion part of that equation. You see, I was carrying speed on the brakes and gaining on the brakes. That was my strength in that particular race. However, I mistakenly tried to continue the momentum gaining on the brakes with continuing to gain mid-corner. I would probably close 2 or 3 bike lengths on the brakes and then close another one mid-corner as we came through the center of this section. However, consistently, that rider was driving off that corner much harder than I was and pulling me 5 or 6 bike lengths. And as a result, he would gap me, and then we get to the next straightaway and I could close back on the brakes, get up to his back tire, but I could never make the pass. My check was I using all the racetrack and was I rolling on in a linear, constant fashion? Check number 1 was I using all the racetrack? And the answer was yes. In fact, I was getting carried out to the racetrack so far that as I rolled on, my rate of roll on generally increased. It would start off going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you get to a next session where it goes 5, 10, 15, 20, and then it goes 20, 40, 80, 100. The last part of the roll-on should really be rolling on. And what happened was I'd get my initial roll going, and then the middle part of my section would last too long. I would never get to the point where I really mashed the throttle until too late in the corner, and that's where my time was being lost. What I noticed was, right where I gained that time, that rider was trail braking an extra moment and doing a really good job getting his direction changed. And so for the next lap, I went in and I just carried my trail braking for a moment longer. It felt like a fraction of a second, maybe a quarter of a second difference. But that quarter of a second difference knocked off a mile an hour or 2 of my mid-corner speed. And that 1 or 2 miles an hour was all I needed to have my bike really change direction. And I probably got pointed up the track 5 degrees better. And on that very next lap, after I figured this out, instead of gaining a bike length mid-corner, I maintained my space mid-corner. And then I maintained that drive, that same gap on the way out. And then, as a result of getting the drive that I should have been getting all race long, I was able to utilize my strength on the brakes and make the pass in the next corner. You see, I was victim of the first type of problem that's common in a drive-focused corner. I was trying to carry too much roll speed. I was trying to treat it too much like a roll speed focused corner. My evidence was my inability to roll on in a constant fashion and keep that ramp really going all the way through the exit. There was a pause, a hesitation in the mid part of my drive, and that made all the difference. Problem 2 is riders that are afraid of a high side, and as a result, will over square the problem. This is very common with newer riders. The problem is risk, fear, and everyone has it. I understand, it's healthy. And just so I can be clear, can you crash on the exit as you experiment with getting better drives? Yes, of course you can. However, can you both reduce risk and increase speed on the exit? Absolutely, yes you can. In our other videos where we talk about threshold attraction, a common question in the comments was, how do I learn about what the threshold attraction feels like? There's a very simple exercise that most any rider can do that will help you understand what it feels like to be on the limit of traction without putting yourself in danger. And it goes like this. It's a parking lot drill. It needs to be a reasonable sized parking lot so you can carry a little bit of speed. 3rd gear, part throttle, maybe 60, 70 miles an hour. And what you want to do is go in a big circle and tighten that circle up as much as you can. And what you want to do is, while holding constant throttle and having correct body position, holding yourself properly on the motorcycle, being engaged with your core and your legs and soft with your hands, doing all you can to help the motorcycle turn, tighten that radius up more and more until you can't go any tighter. When you get to the tightest circle you can hold, you have found your threshold attraction. The bars will feel heavy. Your ability to tighten your line will go away. If you think about it, most riders feel this several times every time they go out and ride. If you've ever gone to a corner fast enough that you've missed an apex, then you understand what that tightness of the bars feels like. That's what we're aiming to make happen on purpose. Here's how you finish the exercise. Once you've established what that feels like, then what you want to do is just like you would at the slowest point of the corner, where you're transitioning from brake to gas. Your constant throttle will begin to increase. And what you want to do is practice doing 2 or 3 circles at that tightest radius. And then I'll physically engage my core, engage my outer leg against the tank, unweight the seat with my quads a little bit, not stand up, but take, instead of a 200-pound rider, instead of leaving 200 pounds in the seat, I'll take 150 pounds and put it in the pegs and 50 pounds in the seat, where I reduce my footprint in the seat and allow the bike to move underneath me. My soft hands and my soft touch in the seat allow that bike to move underneath me, so I'm not giving the bike any force it doesn't want. I am allowing it to stand up if it wants. And then what you do is simply roll on in a constant, smooth fashion where your right wrist is connected to the rear tire. That means you don't get ahead of what the engine's doing. You'll go all the way through instead of gassing it and waiting for the bike to catch up with you all at once. That's the no-no. The smooth roll-on. And what you'll do is you'll practice letting the bike stand up underneath you. What's the testing process to understand what's going on? Remember, again, first, we have to have direction. Second, remember the gas on bike up zones. For example, 30 feet on the 400. It's 80 feet long on the 600, and it's 200 feet long on the 1000. Those are the zones where we let the bike stand up underneath us without giving it handlebar input, where we do nothing but give it the most possible grip it can have for going forward. Our discussion about getting great drives will continue in part 2, which will be released in this channel in a few days as soon as we're done editing it. To be notified when that video comes out, please click the subscribe button, and also be sure to click that little notification bell so you'll be notified when it's released. While you're down there, please help this channel reach more people by clicking the like button as well. Part 2 will cover some incredibly valuable details so you can better understand the limit of traction and improve your drives with confidence. We have both on-track and off-track exercises that have proven to be extremely effective in helping students understand grip and get better drives. Be sure to check that one out. So with that, thanks for watching, and be sure to join us for part 2. And until next time, ride fast, ride safe.